Hello, everybody, and welcome to B-Sides Pyongyang. I obviously have to hide my face because Kim Jong-un does not like my rapping skills. All right, so who the heck am I? My name is Jack Sessions. This is my talk, Counterintelligence in the Age of JucheNet, Signals, Spoofs. Let's get into it. All right, so who am I? One, I'm a mobile security and counterintelligence researcher. I'm also a professional meme lord of 21 years. I know, quite a lot of experience. I'm a bartender IRL because, gotta stack that social cred. I'm a hacker in virtual reality. I did punch Zuck in the metaverse once and stole his vape. Apart from that, I'm working on artificial reality and the augmentation of human interfaces. And, I just fixed ITS security for the memes, data insurance, and the whole New World financial model system. I'm a cybersecurity rapper off the top of the dome, of course. I'm a pre-seed money computer science student, which is another way for saying I'm poor. I have some CVEs to prove I'm actually elite. And I'm wanted for treason because everybody is, right? Okay, so let's jump into it, right? So this is the enemy, as Jocko Willick would say. So North Korean APT groups and just the security field in general generally comes down to these three people. You have the Workers' Party of Korea, you have the GSD, which then falls into all the military intelligence and military security apparatuses, and then you have the Ministry of State Security, better known as China. So because we have a lot of stuff to cover here, effectively all you need to know is this is all just one big chart that goes back to Kim, and there's different specialties and subspecialties within it, right? So you can see here that the third bureau of the RGB does espionage, but some do AI. So let's get into that. All right. So what is counterintelligence? So fundamentally, counterintelligence is just the act of controlling your battle space, right? So if you're able to control an enemy's perception and battle space of an area, so let's say, you're having some really cool data that you want to share, cool. Well, people are going to intercept that and they're going to try to get that intelligence, counterintelligence, like, cool, let's feed them fake data so we know who the attackers are and we can, put them in jail. So this is kind of a flowchart of the original hackers of North Korean APTs to now, right? As you can see, there's a lot. So we have Lazarus Group in 09 to 10. We then have a bunch of APTs kind of evolving from the Lazarus Group in 2014 to roughly 2015. And then in 2020, 21, so the Dark Ages, we have a lot of issues surrounding stuff like cryptocurrencies and there's remote workforces. Okay, so the goal of counterintelligence is simply don't get lured into a honey trap for China and North Korea. I know it's much harder than it looks. It's all good. Yep. Okay, so fundamentally, right, that's basically what counterintelligence is. Okay, now human intelligence versus SIGINT. So we're seeing a very interesting merge of the DPRK really using real-time behavioral cues and behavioral analysis, and that can be stuff like keyboard layout, time zones, syntax, comment history, uh, the idiosyncrasies of a person or perceived person to align with a persona or identity structure that could be used to take over and build rapport. And then, well, rapport is the enemy of IT, right? Also with the clicky finger of doom. So, because humint is a very important thing, we have stuff like personal websites, resumes, GitHubs, and job interviews actually being attacked by foreign North Korean intelligence. And we see this on the bottom here with the senior software engineer. It's actually done by AI. He's actually part of the General Reconnaissance Bureau of North Korea. Now, on the other side, this is generally just a flow chart of how they might be able to use it. Okay. So we have identity theft, and then that goes into forged credentials. We then get into use of Gen AI for assisted interviewing, because of course the interview process doesn't suck enough. We then have the interview stage. Generally, they'd be hired for employment. They'd be given a laptop, and then they would infect it, or they'd be given access to the company network, and they'd be able to effectively attack it. And then they just pivot from there, right? Project managers to payment facilitators to money launderers, and then that ultimately goes back to North Korea. Okay, so fundamentally, logs, code, and telemetry, right? So they're all spoofable within any context. So logs can look clean, but the identities behind them generally are not. Now, we see this a lot with APT attack groups where they just are doing a lot of living off the lamb type attacks, right? And weirdly enough, a lot of the good ones are using Western infrastructure and fake logins to obscure their true affiliations. And because we're seeing a lot of login abuse, we're seeing a lot of credential reuse across fake identities and different domains across AWS and Azure just spin up like that. And it just shows a very critical point in log attribution. Okay, so spoofed signals. So generally, employees tend to spoof US time zones. They write in fluent English, they mask Mac and Wi Fi and Bluetooth, as well as location data itself. Now, hidden DPRK IT workers generally they're going to use the widely acceptable standard, right? Because if you want to attack something, you'll want to blend in, right? So they use stuff like GitHub, LinkedIn, um, Stack Overflow, if that's still a thing, to simulate that they actually know what they're doing and to build a footprint of credibility, because this industry is fundamentally based on trust, and that trust can be exploited, which is paradoxically interesting, but that's a whole other tangent. Now, because a lot of them do tend to, use resumes, LinkedIn, and use humint to actually attack their adversaries, you'll see a lot of the comments and commits written in English, a lot of Western naming conventions, as well as a lot of idiosyncrasies of a Western person being used, right? So they're targeting mainly US and EU orgs, but actually they're starting to appear in Southeast Asia as well, particularly in Japan and a couple of nuclear sites, but that's a whole separate tangent. Now, because they're doing that, a lot of them will actually use virtual machine profiles and falsely registered devices, as we've seen in the US with, I believe, that lady who had like 40 different laptops in her basement that was housing a DPRK server farm, as you do. So this now gets us to fake logs and metadata. So users will generally spoof IPs with VPNs to change machine fingerprint data. They will use logins to actually correlate with behavioral times, right? So if you're active at 3 a.m., that's really sus. But if you're on the night shift, it's kind of not. And if you just have that metadata, it's very interesting from a persona perspective, because if you know what normal is, you can then blend into it, right? So, for example, right, we have Pyongyang, and then it has the 175.server address, and then it goes to 192, then it goes to 46 and 176, then it goes to VPN providers, right? They don't have tail scale up there, so they're already doomed. And it then leads to a victim organization, and then it goes all the way back. So it's quite interesting from an attacker's perspective. Okay, now we get to meme narrative and counterintelligence within it. So they generally posed as candidates during peak remote work cycles. So it'll be a lot of software development, a lot of freelance development. They will be exceptionally skilled in a domain that's very, very difficult. So generally be like industrial control systems or finance or something very difficult to actually go and get in the normal talent pool. Now, because of this, a lot of the resumes are generally scraped from top developers or top people in the field, and then they just fabricate it using just normal templates on LinkedIn and Indeed. And yeah. All right, so this is generally a case study. So what we see is a lot of IT workers are doing malicious code via GitHub linked to false names. Now, because the malware is misattributed to legitimate companies, the biggest issue is reused environments, because in dev, we all love to just redo and keep going and keep going, right? So what this effectively shows is we have the interviewer, its initial download, its JavaScript is then a credential stealer component. We then have, it's attacking smart contracts, and then it's executing a multi-stage payload from that, right? And this is a very common tactic that they use. So another case study is clean logs, but the intent is actually really bad. So I said how logs can be spoofed. So behavioral data exposes a lot of very interesting anomalies from that, right? Especially when you correlate it to a context of profile analysis. So when you can actually cross-reference the login dates with, let's say, the working hours and the biometric signals of that person. So how do they type? How do they talk? How do they walk? What is their psychological state at that time? So if they're not erratic and they're downloading, all the company's financial documents at 1 a.m., that's kind of sus. And because of that, you're then able to see, well, we should probably look into this. And what we can see now is we have the attacker going after a maintenance and repair company in a supply chain to go after, let's say, the server, then goes into a C2 server. We then go to lateral movement. We attack the PMS, and then we get to employee PCs. That's pretty standard now with North Korean attack vectors. So now we get to behavioral stuff, right? So generally, a lot of the development people within the North Korean APT groups will use, non-QWERTY based things. And they use a lot of the same file naming schemes in order to actually, do their stuff, because they're hacking hundreds of companies. It's very difficult to keep track of them. Now, because of behavioral slips, right? So stuff like time of work, the mistaken payment info, aliases, talking about stuff in previous campaigns, talking about stuff in future campaigns. You can then actually do a lot within this. So in the GitHub screenshot, this is a North Korean attacker who's like, hey, I know this random person. I can vouch for him, like a normal crypto scam. And it's like, damn, I think we should find the author of the code. Well, you're not going to because of the fake profile. So, all right. So this is kind of the mindset that is very important, right? So the logs lie, but fundamental behavioral patterns don't, right? So in order, if you run a defensive team or just a counterintelligence ethos within an environment, you should really be able to run behavioral-based profiling within your development environments, within your security environments, and within your overarching company. Because remember how I said counterintelligence is protecting the battle space? If you protect the battle space, you don't have a battle. So this leads me on to my other point. If you can validate the human layer and the machine layer, this is how you win at counterintelligence, especially in the modern game. Now, assume that generally a lot of the personas online are fake and it has a lot of embellishment because a lot of people lie on their resumes, but a lot of people are not claiming to be a North Korean spy. Damn, I should really do that next time I interview. Anyway, you can also do stuff like email analysis. You can look at blockchain payouts. You can do chain analysis. And you can just go through what is sus on a lot of these North Korean attack campaigns and see how it actually works. Or just do what I do and just run a common access card whenever you want to log into your machine, like a normal person. Okay, so I'm going to leave you with three key insights about this. So this is a national security challenge, right? A lot of these operators are embedded within the global supply chain of systems, and waiting is simply not an option because they are better than us. Now, I do have a solution for that if any of you do want to reach out to me about that. So in order to attribute attacks against them, we need to understand this threat, right? And we understand it from a spearhead of three different ways, right? Behavioral insights, contextual intelligence, and the awareness of the motivations driving these operatives. And if we can get them to safety, because the number one goal in counterintelligence is to generally flip an asset to your side or not. And see, a lot of these people are going to be talking about the APT versus IT worker debate. That's obsolete. They're all attackers. And they function generally as a single enterprise in service to Kim Jong-un and the regime's priorities and neighboring countries, China, Iran, and the proxy war, right? Because warfare is just based on deception, as Clausewitz said. And as our Lord and Savior George Washing Machine said, stay strapped or get clapped. Thank you. This has been me, Jack Sessions. So y'all can take a screenshot, right? This is my LinkedIn, my Proton Mail, and my Signal. If y'all want to, hit me up and talk about pretty much anything, that's all good. But I got a really interesting treat for y'all. You know how I said I was a rapper? I'm gonna drop a freestyle off the top of the dome. Okay. Don't have music because we're actually not able to run it in the audio session. So, got Kimmy in the DM. So let's hit it up. All right. Yo, they call me MZ1. I'm spitting fire on this beat. I'm gonna do a Pyongyang freestyle rap. Just wait. Okay. Yo, I'm a ghost in the log, but there's no stack in a trace. Yo, I got a VPN mask with a virtual face. Yo, from Pyongyang to GitHub, they spoof and evade. Yo, fake devs in the West with a Mac that's flayed. Okay. Yo, QWERTY's on deck, but the layout is slipped. At 3 a.m. PST, their keyboard's tripped. Yo, got the JucheNet dreams on a freestyle rap, but I scan those commits like it's a hidden trap. Okay. Yo, Got a fake personas in the LinkedIn maze. Damn, I messed up. Okay, yo. Fake personas in the LinkedIn maze. Remote work shield for a CI phase. Yo, the resume's clean. Yo, but the vibe's off beat. The time zones clash in the audit's heat. Okay, got the behavioral tics. Yeah, that is the key. Got the keyboard ghost prints, tell the whole story. Yo, attribution's dead, but that's a narrative fight. Logs lie, but behavior, that shines in the night. So, yo, B-sides, if you messing with this, just make some noise. And remember, be bright as Ray, and just go out and dominate today. Metal 01 out.